get started with today's webinar. Again, today's webinar is the CAEP CFAD webinar on the 1920 allocation with Neil Kelly of the CAEP office, along with myself, Veronica Parker. I'll be assisting him throughout a section of today's webinar. The PowerPoint is available for download in the resources pod. So if you select the PowerPoint and select download this file, it will download to whatever browser your computer download files to. In addition, if you registered for today's webinar prior to about maybe 12:30 or so, you did receive a copy of the PowerPoint presentation in your email. So if you do have access to that, you can use it to take notes, jot down questions, and ask them at any point in time, as well as follow along with today's webinar, especially if you are on the telephone. If you have any questions throughout today's webinar, please be sure to post them in the the chat pod throughout the webinar. Either myself or Neil will address your questions, so please be sure to post them in the chat pod. If we do not get to your questions immediately, we will be sure to get to them as soon as we are able to. But please just post them in there. In addition, if you experience any technical issues, please post those issues in the chat pod, and either myself or Melinda will be on hand to assist you, and that will be via a private chat. So at the bottom of the chat pod, you will see a yellow tab, and it will be highlighted with either my name or Melinda's name. And that's our way of communicating with you to assist you with any technical issues you may be experiencing. Today's webinar is being recorded, and it will be available on the California Adult Education website. So before we depart from today's webinar, I will be sure to post the URL of exactly where you will be able to find the webinar recording as well as the PowerPoint presentation. So if you have to go back and listen to it again, or if you would like to share with others, you'll be able to point them in the right direction. At the end of the webinar, an evaluation will appear. Please be sure to let us know what you thought about today's webinar, and if there are any technical assistance or professional development needs you have at this time, we'll be able to address them via the evaluation. And also, we will also post a URL of our upcoming professional development activities, such as in-person trainings and webinars. So if you haven't had a chance to register for any of the wonderful events we have coming up, you'll be able to do so via the URL that I will post. Now I will turn it over to Neil, who will get us started with today's webinar. Neil?
Thanks, Veronica. Hi, this is Neil Kelly with the CAEP office in Sacramento. We haven't done a webinar for a while, so looking forward to today. Our next webinar won't be until May. I think it's May 10th. Veronica and I were just talking about we're going to do a Census 2020 webinar on May 10th. So we'll get that out to you sometime next week so you can sign up if you're interested in getting students or teachers or yourself hired as a census enumerator. And then later this month, I'll be at the CCAE conference as well as the Academic Senate non-credit event, both in San Diego, both the last week of April. So with that said, let's take a look at the agenda today. So I'll be covering the 1920 allocation process, the CFAD criteria and timeline, the CFAD processing and deliverables, some Q&A, and then I'll turn it over to Veronica, and she'll kind of walk you through the steps that you would take in NOVA to submit the CFAD member certification, those kind of things. Then I'll go into allocation amendments, what that process is about, and then turn it over to Veronica, and she'll show you how to perform an allocation amendment in NOVA. And if we have any time left over, which I think we will, we can answer any other questions you have. And so if you're new to these webinars, usually what we do is we go through a slide, and then we'll check the chat. We'll try to respond to those questions, because sometimes waiting to the end, questions pile up, or it's tough to scroll through the chat. So we'll try to stay on top of the chat, answer your questions, and even if it's a repeat of a similar question, we want to be respectful, and we do want to answer all the questions and give people appropriate responses. So bear with us. That's kind of how we do these webinars. I know it's not like some other webinars, but that's kind of the way we've doing it for the last 3 years. Okay, So here's the allocation process. If you didn't know, we got an extra $18 million for the California Adult Education Program in the governor's proposed budget. So prior year we got 21 million. This year we got 18 million. And so there's still opportunity for more money because we go through the budget hearing process, and that's taking place this month. And then that leads to the May revise, which could result in additional funding. And then that leads to the legislature approving the budget and then the governor signing it and us getting the money out. But let's take a step back. So the way this works, and I'm looking at the slide here. So in January, the governor released his budget with the $18 million increase. Then I think we got it out earlier, but about mid-February or so, we released the preliminary allocations on the website and in the newsletter. So that's been posted. It shows 2 years with the COLA, the 18 million. It rebenches the amount. So now, if all goes well and the governor signs it, we'd be close to 540 million as our base allocation. And so consortia should be setting up public meetings using our education code for the California Adult Ed program on decision making in public meetings, as well as Brown Act, to discuss the 1920 allocation. So you should be doing that, setting them up. Maybe you've already had these meetings because March or April, because sometimes it takes a while to get on agendas. So if you haven't, you should hurry to do that because these documents showing your allocations are due May 2nd. And so we need that information as soon as possible. That's why May 2nd is a hard date. If we don't have it, we have to use last year's percentages because we have to calculate how much is going out to what consortia, to which fiscal agent, or to which direct funded agencies, and that has to get processed, and then we have to do an interagency agreement that goes to CDE, and then it has to go over to controller. So there's so many steps, and the state keeps adding steps to this, and this is why it took us, 6 months, 7 months to get the money out on the K-12 side to fiscal agents that were K-12s last year. So we're hoping not to repeat that, but it seems like we're always late. And there are remedies to that, but that would require a lot of big changes in the way we do business. But anyway, so then I got off on a little tangent there. So then in June, the legislature approves, and then or legislative approval, and then the governor signs, and then those schedules are sent to controllers. For some reason, the college schedules get processed sooner. They get processed in August, and the K-12 schedules get processed later because of the interagency agreement and the new state accounting system. So there's all kinds of reasons that interagency agreement does slow things down. So apologize for that. And then let me see as I go to the next slide if we have any questions. It says Eileen. In a meeting this morning, it was stated that a rumor is the state is short on funds and we may not be receiving our 1920 COLA. Rumor or not? Nope, I have not heard that. The hearings, we're having hearings next week, budget, assembly, and Senate budget, education committees. I have not heard that at all. So that's the first I've heard of that. So no truth as far as what we're hearing, but can't say for sure, but I haven't heard anything like that. And then Peggy asks, is there a short summary of the Brown Act on the CAPE website? Okay, so Veronica did give you, there's a pamphlet we've posted on the website. It kind of gives you like a how-to, but as far as direction and technical assistance on the Brown Act, you really need to check with your district legal counsel or your district. because everybody kind of interprets Brown Act a little differently, and it's something that we don't really get into at the state level. I mean, we can say you have to adhere to it, but as far as how you do that is really up to your local district and how they interpret the Brown Act rules. Okay, and then Marianne asks, what information specifically needs to be presented in a public meeting relative to the CFAD overall consortia allocation, specific member allocation? I think it would be if you're a fiscal agent and the money's going to the fiscal agent, I mean, eventually you're going to have the discussion of how much everybody's getting, and that should be public information. Now, if there is discussion about, who's getting what, last year maybe one member got all of the COLA, or you have new members, I mean, all that should be out in the open and discussed in a public meeting. If you don't have those kind of discussion items, then it would be like, here's how much we get, this is the preliminary allocation that we received, here's how it's going to be reflected with our members, and we'll vote to see if that's how everybody wants to go. Unanimous vote, then it moves forward. I mean, you're just basic public meeting quorum. I don't know if allocations get discussed in a private setting. I mean, that's really up to your charter and bylaws and Brown Act. I would assume with Brown Act that should be discussed in a public setting, but you need to check. So, and then Keita says, is there a formula for how the COLA is distributed to consortium members? We'll talk about that. But at a minimum, everyone gets no less than the prior year. And so since the prior year, you got a $21 million increase, and this year, so far, you're getting a $18 million increase. So you couldn't give them the same amount, but you could give them the same percentage. Unless the members decide to do something else and everybody's in agreement. But I'll cover that in a little bit. I have some slides on that. And Marina says, if each member is direct funded, are allocations decided by the consortium? Absolutely. So, I mean, there are some restrictions that I'll go over, and there are some ed codes that restricts what you can do, but it's still up to the consortia on how, those funds are allocated. And we'll talk about this later in the webinar, but you can't vote against somebody and take their money away unless you're meeting the ed code. So we'll get into that, but hold your questions on that. I'm going to cover that in a couple of slides. Okay, and this is kind of what Marina might have been asking, and Keita as well. CFAD criteria. CFAD process meets legislative requirements to have CAPE funding dispersed within 45 days of the governor signing the state budget. CFAD is a one-time process due once a year on May 2nd. The CFAD is used by the state to document prior year allocations. So when you fill out the CFAD in NOVA, it's a one-time thing. You can't, you submit this in May, you can't in August say, oh, we want to change our CFAD, or in December, oh, we changed our mind. You can't go back and change it. It's a one-time May due date, and it stays until the next year until you go through this process again. The CFAD is also used to set up CAPE funding disbursement to direct fund it as well as fiscal agent consortia. So, and then here's the timeline. I'm going to get to those questions in a second. So the timeline should be you're reviewing your preliminary allocations that we released in February. And then you set up your public meetings, and that should have been March and April. Get on the agenda for any local board approval, and that would have been, probably back in February. You should have. Now, it depends on your consortia. Not everyone has to go back to, so the way the ed code is written, the member that votes on decision making at the consortium level is the official district representative, and those decisions are final. So it doesn't really have to go back to a local board at a district member. Now, you might have some governance rules that have superintendents as your decision-making body, and they choose to vote on this and have a meeting to ratify the CFAD, and so that would be that local board approval. But in no way do these go back to local districts for approval. That member representative from the district is the one that makes the decision, and the vote is final, and it doesn't go back to the district, just so you know. So give yourself plenty of time to certify the CFAD. So we're down to, what, less than a month? Get this all done by May 2nd. And so then here's the kicker: failure to have your CFAD certified by that May 2nd date will force the state to use prior year allocation percentages. Because of the timeline and the squeeze that we have to get this money out, we can't wait. We can't say, you can't say, oh, we're not having our meeting until the end of May, or I didn't get something scheduled until first week of June. It's not going to work. We need those numbers because we have to go to Board of Governors. We have to get their approval. Then we have to get the interagency agreement. We have to go to contracts and the state accounting system. It all is pretty crazy, and that's why the May 2nd date is a hard due date. So let's see. Let's go. Let me see if I have one more slide covering this. Okay, so here's another one, and then we'll go back. Let's see if I have one more after this. Okay. Let's do a couple more slides, and I'll go back to questions, and I'll turn it over to Veronica to walk you through it. So in addition to regular CFAD processing, the 1920 COLA would be an across-the-board increase for all members. If members are in agreement, you could use other options. So let's say your members get together and you don't want to do across-the-board COLA or don't want to reflect last year's or prior year allocation percentages, and you want to do something different. If every member is in agreement, because one member can hold this up. So if all members are in agreement, you could do an allocation based on need in the community. So if you have a new member or you have a member that's taking on an area that has unmet need, you could allocate more funds to that member, but everybody would have to be in agreement. You could also use this money, the COLA, to fund new members. You could do it to reflect members that have carryover from prior year. So if someone hasn't spent all their money from prior year and they have millions of dollars, do they deserve funding in the new year? But they would have to be agreeable to that. Factor in any member reductions or help fund next year's projects that need resources. Like I said, members have to be 100% in agreement to use this option, instead of doing like across the board COLAs or reflecting prior year allocation processing. Let me do one more slide. CFAD deliverables: creation of CFAD showing the 1920 distribution of funds to each member of the allocation, and you do a narrative and you explain to us any fiscal changes. So maybe you were direct funded, now you're going back to a fiscal agent, or you were a fiscal agent and you're going to direct funding, or if you're going to do prior allocation amounts, and then you have to designate, maybe you had a change in fiscal agents, or if you went to direct funded. So all those things are reflected in NOVA. I'm going to pause there before I turn it over to Veronica, and I want to go back. So Keita said, is there a formula for how the COLA is distributed to consortium members? So the Ed Code says nobody gets less than the prior year funding. So you look at those percentages of how people were funded last year. So they can't get any less than that percentage. And then it would be other things like if everybody's agreeable, you could do something different than that. So those are kind of the formula that you would use. You could either use prior year percentages, or if everybody's in agreement, you could do something different. There are two other Ed Code reasons of not giving somebody funding, or three. It's if somebody can't do it, or they don't want to provide services, or they're an ineffective member. And so those are the three reasons why somebody wouldn't get their prior year allocation. Either, let's say they had a financial crisis at their district, and they said, we just can't do it anymore. We don't have any teachers. We laid everybody off. We closed our school building. Can't do it. Okay. So then they don't get the money. Or they said that they don't have the ability or they can't do it. There's a couple other reasons. But then the ineffective member thing would be something that your consortium has decided. I mean, we have ways of tracking, who's delivering, who's submitting their reports on time, who's submitting their student data, all that kind of stuff. But you can go a little deeper and say, this is what we determine as member effectiveness. And if everybody agrees to that and you hold each other to that, and if someone's not being effective and you're trying to help them and they still aren't being effective, then that could be another way to take away their money. But that's about it, Kita. Okay, so Marina says, if each member is directly funded, are allocations decided by the consortia? Well, they have to vote and certify it, but it's prior year, kind of like the same things that I said. You would have to have a discussion if the member is still wishing to offer these services like they did last year, or if they can offer these services, or if they're ineffective, then that would be a consortia level decision. And so it's just, even if you're direct funded, you just don't say, I automatically get the money. You have to look to see if you're meeting that criteria. Then if everybody's in good standing, then you would say, okay, how do we want to do this? Do we want to do the same amount as last year? Or is there some compelling reason why somebody should get some more? You have the discussion in a public setting. And then if members are agreeable to giving somebody more, they could do that. If they're not agreeable, then it just reverts back to prior year percentages. I think I took care of that for Marina. And then Kristen says, we still would like to see the unanimous vote requirement revisited and revised. So you can't outvote somebody, but let's say, I mean, this is kind of gray area. So everybody gets no less than the prior year. That's ed code. So we can't change that. Where we don't have ed code on is, let's say we got more than prior year. So right now we have 18 million that we're getting. We had 21 million the prior year, so we're not getting more than the prior year. But let's say we got 100 million. And that covers everybody from the prior year. So now we have this big pot of money. We don't really say like everybody gets to split all that extra money. It just says about the prior year. So I think that's where your bylaws and your governance comes in. And I would make sure you have bylaws that state if you get above prior year amount and there's extra funding, how do you allocate that? And what's the process? Because there's nothing in ed code that says if we get a lot of extra money, how do we allocate that? Because everybody would be fully funded from prior year, and that covers ed code. But anything past that is really kind of unexplored area, and we haven't really done that yet. So that would be the only way, Kristen, we would see maybe bylaws that govern, additional above and beyond prior year funding. And so that would be something that your consortia could look at, and you could create rules to say what happens in event that you get, a huge sum of funding. So Sherry asks, what about amendments to the CFAD? No such thing. We used to do it. It caused problems. We don't do CFAD amendments. What we do are allocation amendments, and I'll cover that in the later in the webinar. So Kristen asks, this can all happen at our regular open public consortium meetings. Yes, it can. Don't need to have separate meetings or go to local boards or others for approval, right? Yes, that's correct. So it can happen one place, one time, with that same group of people. They should not go back to local boards. If you have someone saying, I have to go back to the local board, you say, then you're not the right person to be representing your district, because the ed code states that member has to be the official representative of the district, and that decision that you make is final. So it doesn't go back to the local board, just so they know. And Peggy says, an across the board COLA is defined as equal share to each agency. So it depends. So I guess that would be technically the definition of a COLA. But if prior year you did something different, then you would have to reflect that prior year percentages. So some people just did across the board COLA based on funding. So it just depends on how you disperse that COLA from the prior year. Basically, most people use the allocation percentages proportional share and did that with the COLA. Now, other people did things differently, but technically, cost of living increase is going to all members, and that would be based on their prior year allocation percentage. So Kristen says, is the additional 18 million considered a COLA? Yes. And Kathleen says, I second Peggy's question. Exactly what is the calculation for across the board? So we don't do any calculation. It's up to you guys to dole out what you believe your COLA is. You're kind of hamstrung because you have to adhere to what you, at a minimum, you have to look at what was allocated last year, look at those percentages to the total allocation, and you can't go any lower than that prior year allocation percentage. So there's no guidance on across the board COLA or calculation. It's prior year allocation, and you get the same percentage. And so I'll leave it at that. So Kita says, how money is the COLA to be distributed to if there is no unanimous votes? So this is where we use prior year funding. So what you do, Kita, is you go to your allocation for last year. You divide each member's allocation into the total. You get a percentage, and that's your prior year allocation proportional share. And so that's the proportionate share, the percentages you would use to calculate the percentage of funding that everybody gets. So if member A last year got 60% of the consortia funding, in 1920 they would get, at a minimum, 60% of the consortia funding. Member B got 20%. They would get 20% in 1920. And so hopefully that makes it, and so on and so on. So how the baseline was funded or the prior year. So Becky's question, how was the baseline, or how the baseline was funded, or prior year, or prior year COLA. So like I said, it's the percentage from prior year of the allocation. And that's what I would use. So Kristen says, does the decision to reduce the member's funding due to one or more of the three units, does that have to be unanimous? Let me think about it. So, I mean, I think in the ineffectiveness, because either someone can or can't deliver adult ed services, or if they voluntarily say we can't do it anymore, I mean, that's not a voting decision. But the ineffective member, I would think that, I mean, you'd have to go back to your bylaws of how you're interpreting and implementing that, because there's no guidance in the ed code for ineffective members. It just says you have to offer technical assistance, and if that doesn't meet the needs of the consortia, and then you can reduce their funding. So, I think there would probably have to be some discussion to see, because it's subjective, on what is an ineffective member, what is appropriate technical assistance, or reasonable assistance, or whatever they call it in the ed code. And so that could be subjective. Someone could say, yeah, I made a phone call and I tried to talk to them and they weren't available, so that's my technical assistance. I mean, so I think that kind of subjectivity is probably up for discussion by the membership, and there probably would be some decision making that would be involved in that. So I don't think it's a slam dunk, especially when you're taking money away. So Marina says no one gets less than the prior year percentage of the total versus total dollars. So it's no one gets less than the prior year funded percentage. So the share that you got last year is the share at a minimum that you get this year. How is, if there is, okay, so I answered your question. All right. I think we're going to have to, I'll try to get these in the chat, and I'll turn it over to Veronica because we want Veronica to show you how to do this stuff. And so I'm going to work in the chat. I'm going to mute myself, and I'm going to bring Veronica.
Thank you, Neil. Is everyone able to hear me? I just want to check before we get started. Okay, great. Thank you very much. So this is the start of your CFAD process in Nova. So once you select the URL, if you have it bookmarked or you type in nova.cccco.edu, you'll be taken to the Nova home screen. If you already have credentials, you'll simply type in your email and password. If for any reason you have forgotten your password, you can select the Forgot Your Password feature and you will receive an email notification from Nova asking you to reset your password, and then you'll go back in and enter in your new email and password. If for any reason you're having issues and you just can't get in, you can always select the help button and then a support request. You will submit a support request. That support request will be sent to Product Ops, which is the system developers for Nova, as well as TAP. And either the either Product Ops or someone from the TAP team will address your support request. And then if you have a new member, so you have a new member agency or someone who's in the capacity for your consortium that are new, you would have them request access to Nova via this button. And so we'll ask them to type in their first name, last name, as well as their email address. They will receive an email to confirm their account and set their password, and then they'll come back out and enter in their email and their password, and that's how they will gain access to Nova. So that's the first area. Next, once you have successfully logged on the left-hand side, in order to get to this particular page, on the left-hand side, you will select Programs, then you will select CAEP. And I'm going to turn on the pointer to see if you all are able to follow me a little bit better. So you'll select Programs, CAEP, and then Consortia and Members, and you'll be taken to this screen. Next, you will type in either you can type in your consortium number, or you can type in a keyword search for your consortium. If you use a keyword search and it's something generic such as consortium or adult or education, a lot of different consortia will appear. You can search for yours, or you can type in something unique that will get you quicker to your actual consortium. So that's how you identify where your consortia is, and then you will be taken to your consortium details page. Now here, since we're starting a new program year, the 1920 program year, this is an opportunity for you to update any information that may be outdated in your consortium details page. So how you would do that would be by just selecting this pencil. That's the edit button, and then you can go in and you can edit any information that may be outdated. Now, the one thing that I would like the microphone. So one thing that I would advise you to do is to check the website for your consortium. Here, this website for Contra Costa, they don't have the HTTPS in front of their website name. So if you all can please just check that to make sure that you do have HTTPS in front of your website name. On the public view, which is on the California Adult Education website, when a public user selects your consortium website and it does not have the security clearance, so it does not have the HTTPS in front of your website name, they will receive a server error. And it's because of the security clearance issue. So please be sure to type that in front of your web address so that the public will be able to access your website. So that's just a quick little update that I wanted to throw in there. Now back to the actual CFAT process. So on your consortium details page, if you scroll down underneath consortium contacts, you'll be taken to the section entitled Consortium Fiscal Administration Declarations, which is also CFAD. And then once you select the 1920 CFAD, you'll be taken to this page. Okay, you'll be taken to this page, which is the fiscal declaration page. So this is the start of the CFAD process. This is the first screen that you will see. On this screen, you are being asked to determine what your disbursement method will be. So first, it's going to give you what your current disbursement method is. So in this case, for Contra Costa, their current disbursement method is fiscal agent. Now, since this is a new year and a new CFAD process, you are given the opportunity to change your disbursement method. Like Neil indicated before, this is the one and only opportunity that you'll have to make this type of change. So if you would like to change your fiscal disbursement method, you select no here. However, if you want to keep it, then you would just select yes. Now, if you select no, you will receive a yellow warning, and we'll go through that in just a second, but a yellow warning will appear on your screen asking you to confirm, because we want to make sure, since this is the one and only time you're able to do this, that you're making the correct decision. However, if you want to simply keep it the same, you will select yes. Now, you have selected yes, so Contra Costa has selected yes, they would like to keep their disbursement method as fiscal agent. So at the top it says you kept your consortium's disbursement method of fiscal agent. Now, if you didn't intend to and you really wanted to change it to direct funding, you still have another opportunity to do so by clicking here to undo what you had just done. It will take you back to the previous screen that we had looked at, and then instead of fiscal agent, you can say no and then change it to direct funded. Now, if you're okay with fiscal agent, here is where you will identify who your fiscal agent is. So this drop down menu, so this arrow here, will show you the list of all of your member agencies, and you will select which member agency will be your fiscal agent. Underneath here, the system does require you to write a narrative, and this narrative will clearly articulate how you plan to use the allocation that you have received from the CAEP program. And this narrative is based on your annual plan, which is also based on your 3-year plan. So be sure to make sure that you clearly articulate how it is you plan to spend these monies. Now, the system does require you to type in at least 5 characters in order to fulfill this section of the fiscal declaration, but you have up to 35 characters. So just be mindful of that. Underneath here, so changes in your fiscal structure. If there are no changes in your fiscal structure, you will simply select no changes. However, if there are changes in your fiscal structure, such as changes in fiscal agent or changes in the funding amount to each member, you do have to explain why you have made this particular change. We call it a justification. So you would simply type in exactly how or what the change in the fiscal structure is. Again, at least 5 characters have to be in here, but you have up to 3,500 characters for this particular section. Once you have finished completing all of this information, you will simply go up to the top and select next, and that will take you to the next section of the CFAD process. As I mentioned before, if you were changing your disbursement method, so you changed it from a fiscal agent to direct funded, the yellow warning sign that I spoke about previously, it has now appeared. So it's just letting you know you have changed the way funds are dispersed to your consortium and its members, and then we would like to acknowledge that you have made this change. So you can either cancel and go back, or you can simply hit change and you're acknowledging, yes, I am in fact making this change. So once you do that, you hit next again, and we'll go on to the next screen. Again, this consortium has changed from a fiscal agent to a direct funded. This consortium, excuse me, Contra Costa has. Again, you are acknowledging that you changed from a fiscal agent, If that was an accident and you do want to actually be a fiscal agent and not direct funded, you can simply click undo and go through the process again. Here, if you have made the choice of changing from a fiscal agent to direct funded, here you would simply type a narrative to articulate that you have chosen to switch your disbursement method, and then you explain why you change. Again, 5 characters here, but you have up to 3,500 characters. And once again, the state would like to know how you plan to use your 1920 allocation, and that's based on your annual adult education plan, which is also based on your 3-year plan. So simply articulate how you plan to use the funds. 5 characters minimum, up to 3,500 characters. Once you have done all of that, you will select next, and then it will take you to the next section, which is your members and certifiers. Now here are your actual members and who are currently members or member representatives of your agencies. So we have Acalines as well as Antioch Unified School District, and we have 2 member representatives and then 3 member representatives. At this point in time, you are able to make any changes to your member representatives. So let's say, for example, Stephen France is no longer with Acalines Unified School District and we want to remove him from the member agency. You can do so by simply clicking this delete button, which is a trash can, and it will remove Stephen from the member agency. Now, it will not remove Stephen from the NOVA system in its entirety. So Stephen will still have his email address and his password to log on to NOVA. However, Stephen will no longer be a member representative of this particular agency, nor will he be a member of the consortium, but he will still be a NOVA user. If you have any additional certifiers that you would like to add, so let's say the agency has brought on another person and they would like this additional person to be a member representative for this agency, you're able to select the Add Certifier and you'll enter in their contact information. We'll go over that in another screen. If this particular member agency is just a voting member only, so they do not receive any CAEP funds, however, you do want them to be a voting member, select this button, and when you go to the allocation section, you will not be able to enter any allocation for them because they are only a voting member. So you have that option as well. Once you have gone through all of your certifiers, so all of your member agencies as well as the individuals who are certifiers, you will select the next button if everything is correct. And again, this is the same screen that we just went over, who the people are in your agencies. If you would like to add anyone, or if you would like to select a voting member only, or if you would like to delete anyone, you're able to do it in this window. Now, if you would like to add a certifier, so as I mentioned before, you have someone new for one of your member agencies and you would like to bring them in as a certifier for the member agency, you can see if they are already a NOVA user by entering their name or their email address. And if they are a NOVA user, then their credentials, not their password or their email address, however, their profile information will appear. And you simply select their profile and you're able to add them. If the person is not here, what you would do is you would enter their information. So you would enter their first name, their last name, and their work email. And once you have entered in this information, you are inviting them to become a NOVA user. So you will select this invite user, and then they will receive an email in their inbox with a confirmation email from NOVA for them to confirm that they are going to be users, and then they will set their password at that time. So I'm going to stop for a moment. So Holly was gracious enough to bring me a question, and it's from Mary. So the question is from Mary Ann, and it says, so a narrative is not required if no changes in the fiscal agent. A narrative, I'm going to go back a couple of slides, and I believe you were referring to this question here, And please post in the chat, Marianne, if this is where you are talking about the narrative section, which I believe so. And this section is to explain how you plan to use the CAEP funds. And that's based on your annual adult education plan, which is based on your 3-year plan. So, Marianne, please let me know if that is what you are referring to. If so, yes, you do have to enter in a narrative as to how you are planning to use the CAEP funds. Now, if there is no change, a narrative for no changes on the fiscal agent.
So, Veronica, let me just interrupt you for a second. So, what we've done in this section, and so any type of changes, we would require you to fill out the change description box at the bottom. So if there's a change in fiscal structure, fiscal agent, some kind of change in the way you're doing your fiscal allocations, any kind of change you can note there. And then, like you said, the narrative is just to provide kind of some background on what you're doing with the funding. But if there are no changes, you just put no changes. I think it does require some kind of something in the box, but you could just put no changes if there's no changes there. I think that's it.
Yes, that is correct, Neil. If there are no changes, the primary contact will select no changes here, and they will not have to fill out this box. Okay, and I see that there's another question from Christy. She asks, do all the certifiers listed have to participate in the certification or only one from each agency? And Christy, yes, that is correct. If you do have multiple member representatives for each of your agencies, they will receive notification that the CFAD was submitted. However, only one person will have to go in and certify. Okay, so I will go back to where we are. Neil, there's a question in there for you. Okay, so we were here. So again, if you do have any new certifiers and they are not a current NOVA user, simply enter in this information, so their first name, last name, and work email, and invite user, and they will receive an email from NOVA asking them to confirm their new account, where they'll be able to set their username and their password, or enter in their email but set their password. Okay, so now that you've taken care of your agencies and your certifiers, now we're on to the member allocation section. So here is where you can put in all of your member allocations for all of your member agencies within your consortium. At the bottom here, once you start entering numbers into these line items, it will total. So total allocated to members, this number will begin to increase. Your total CAEP funds, that's a stagnant number. That's the number that was pre-populated based on the preliminary allocation schedule. However, once you start entering individual member allocations, and this number begins to increase, so the total allocated to members begins to increase, this number, the total remaining number, will begin to decrease. In order for you to complete this section of the CFAD process, the total remaining amount has to equal 0. That means that every dollar that you have been allocated from the CAEP office has to be allocated to each of your members. So before the system will let you go on, you do have to make sure that this number equals 0. And then the total allocated to members and then total CAEP funds, those two numbers should equal each other before the system will allow you to move on. Once you have entered in all of the allocations and you verify that these numbers are correct for each of your members, and these two numbers total, so your total allocated to members and total CAEP funds, those numbers are the same, and your total remaining is 0, then you're able to move on by selecting next. So once you select next, or in my examples here, we're entering the member allocations. We haven't gotten to Huntington Beach yet. There's still 4 million, over 4 million left, so you can enter that in for Huntington Beach, and then the total allocated to members and total CAEP funds will then marry one another, and the total remaining will be 0. And an example of that is here. So again, each member received an allocation. Your total allocated to members and total CAEP funds are the same, and your total remaining is 0. That's a completed member allocation section of the CFAT process. Now here, this is an example of voting members only, so voting members and members who receive allocations. So here you can see each of the members who have zeros, those members are voting members only, and then each of the members who have actual allocation amounts, these are members who receive CAEP funds. Down here, the total allocated to members and total CAEP funds are the same, but the total remaining is 0. This is a completed process, and you also know that it's completed because it says completed here on the underneath the workflow. Now, once you have completed this section, you will simply select Next, and then you'll go to the review section of the CFAD process. So the review section shows you that it's still in draft form because you have not submitted anything. It'll give you your consortium name, your funding channel. So in this case, Contra Costa switched from a fiscal agent to direct funded. The justification. So since they did go from from fiscal agent to direct funding, they had to submit some type of justification. And then their narrative talks about how they plan to use the CAEP allocation for 1920, which is based on the annual plan, which is also based on the 3-year plan. And then in terms of their fiscal structure, they selected they had no changes, so that no changes portion is listed here. Underneath, verify again that all of your allocations are correct. Members who are voting only did not receive any allocations, and your total allocated to members equals the total CAEP funds. Once you have verified that everything is correct, then you will select Submit. Once you select Submit, a pop-up screen will appear. And it's simply saying by clicking OK, you are affirming that the CFAD is ready to be reviewed by the selected member representatives. If there are any comments or any heads ups or anything like that that you would like to pass on to the signing authorities, you would type in that information here. So once they receive notification that the CFAD has been completed, they'll receive the comments that you have provided for them here. If there are no comments, you can simply leave this section blank and you will select OK, unless you have to select cancel and go back and make some changes. In this case, we're going to select OK. Again, this is the CFAD summary, and then we hit it OK or next again, and this is the notification that each of your member representatives for each of your agencies will receive. So it's going to appear with their name, and then this is a standard message. So it's just notifying them that the 2019-20 CFAD for this particular consortium has been submitted for approval. And then it lets them know that since they are a member representative of the consortium, they will need to review the CFAD and either approve it or reject it. So once they've read this, they can simply select click here to access the actual CFAD. Once they select click here, they will be taken to the CFAD. So they'll be able to review each of their allocation, the amount, the total amount for the consortium, any comments that were made, any changes in fiscal structure, etc. They'll be able to see all of that information. Now here I want to take you to this section. So all of the members except for Chafee CCD have approved the CFAD. So someone within that member agency approved. So you see all of their approvals here, and they're all in green. Now, Chafee has not approved yet. They're still going through the approval process. We have 2 member representatives, Matthew and Nicole Alexander. They can either reject or approve. In this case, they are going to reject. So for some reason, they are not satisfied with the CFAD and they would like to reject it. They don't want to approve it at this time. So by clicking OK, they are in fact rejecting the CFAD in its current state. And if there's any dialogue, any conversation, then they can type it in the comments to let the primary contact know that they are rejecting it, and they may want to include the reasons why. Once they have typed in their comments, they will simply select OK. Once they select OK, the primary contact will be notified that the CFAD has been rejected by this particular member. So they will receive notification. Now it's going to say rejected. So of course it's in bright red and it lets you know that it is rejected. It doesn't say whom it's rejected by, but you'll know in the notification whom the agency in its entirety rejected the CFAD. Now, once the CFAD has been rejected, the primary contact in the agency or the consortium works out any details to get it to approval status. Once they've worked out all of their details and taken a vote or whatever the case may be for that particular consortium, the primary contact will now go back into the CFAD and make whatever changes are necessary to get it into approval status. The the primary contact has to make at least one change in the allocation amount for this particular agency in order for the CFAD to be in reapproval status. So at least one change has to be made, whether it's just $1, $2, $5, whatever the case may be. At least one change has to be made in the CFAD in order for the primary contact to resubmit the CFAD for reapproval. Now, once they have made whatever changes, have whatever negotiations they had to have, then now the member representative will now be notified that the CFAD is now it's awaiting approval again. So they'll receive that notification that I had put on the screen before to let them know that it's awaiting approval. Again, they can either approve or reject the CFAD. In this case, this member representative decided to approve the CFAD. So now all of the agencies within this consortium have approved the CFAD. And so now, as you can see up top, the consortium has approved the CFAD and the CFAD process has been completed. As Neil stated before, this is the one and only time you're able to do this, and you have to do it by May 2nd. So that's it for this section of the CFAD process in NOVA. Are there any questions that I can answer at this time? I'm looking in the chat and I see that Neil has covered everything. Neil, is there anything that I may be missing?
No, I think you're good.
Okay.
I'm just answering Eileen. So instead of typing, because sometimes I make typos. So Eileen's the only question we haven't answered. So Eileen, you got to be careful. We don't recommend that members hold funds for other agencies. It just makes for real bad accounting. It messes up NOVA. And so that's something I would take offline, work through with TAP, because we don't want members holding funds at the consortia level. So one member's holding these funds, because each member is responsible for their own allocation, their own budget. So if someone's going to do the professional development for the consortia, then that's in their budget. They're not technically holding funds. That's their responsibility, and they are supposed to spend those monies. If they start moving it around throughout the year, it's just going to cause problems. You can do it, but we've seen nothing but problems when people start holding funds and holding it for other members. It just gets really confusing. So I would not advise that. Okay, so some of the questions that were coming up while Veronica was talking on policy. So just a reminder, even if that member does reject or refuses to certify and doesn't want to go along with it, the state's going to move forward. So what we'll do is we'll just look at the prior year percentages. So if that member got 30% last year and wants to get 80% this year and nobody's going along with them, and they refuse to sign the CFAD or certify it in NOVA, we're just going to give them the 30% and we'll put it into NOVA ourselves. The state will override that. So don't let that worry you. We'll be able to push forward. That May 2nd date is a firm date. And so if we do have some stragglers, or if you just can't get your act together, we'll make that decision for you, because we have to move forward. Okay, so somebody wanted to know about allocation amendments. So just really quick, Allocation amendments is a tool that you can use after the CFAD. So the CFAD is a one-time, once-a-year tool that you use to allocate funds for the year. So then, let's say in August, somebody says, that building I said I wanted to build, and we had allocated $500,000 for these portables or whatever, and now we realize that they said they're not going to deliver it in time. It's going to be a year late, so we're not going to need that money. So what you could do is do an allocation amendment and give that money to the other members. Or let's say you have target spending and everybody agreed by the end of the year we're all going to spend at this amount. And any money that's left over that people haven't spent gets reallocated to all the members that have spent. So that would be another case that you could use the allocation amendments. None of these activities affect the CFAD. So let's say that member with the building or the portable that doesn't get taken care of and they want to give the money back and give it to other members for the year, they can do that. Or if the target spending doesn't work, you reallocate funds at the end of the year. Come the CFAD next year, everyone gets the same amount that you had in the prior year CFAD. So it kind of rebenches or resets itself. So you could do all kinds of stuff during the year. You could move money around. You could give away all your money. You're still going to get that same amount unless there's those three criteria, three reasons. Either you can't do it, you don't want to do it, or you're an ineffective member. Or you agree to doing something different. And that's the 100% agreement. If everyone's agreeable to that, then you can do whatever you want in the CFAD. But keep in mind that once that's entered in the CFAD, that's set for next year as well. So if there's an argument, let's say that member lost its official member, and in comes a new superintendent or a new director of the adult ed program, and they say, I don't care what the agreement was last year. That was a verbal agreement, and we want all our money. That kind of thing happens. People have short memories, so that's why that prior year thing is always good to stabilize. And then if you want to do stuff during the year, you use this allocation amendment. So let's talk about how to do these allocation amendments, and then Veronica's going to show you how to do it in the system. So member allocations can be amended after the CFAD is submitted. Has nothing to do with the CFAD, and the consortia can adjust allocations throughout the year with consent of its membership. So when you do an allocation amendment, all the members have to certify. So you can't, like, one member talk to one member, say, like, hey, I'm going to send you $100,000 of my funds. Don't tell anybody, and we'll just keep it our little secret. Nope, not going to happen. All the members have to be aware of that, and all the members have to certify that you're moving money around. So there has to be discussion. Why are you giving so-and-so that $100,000? I have this brand new program. I need funding too. So there has to be that open and transparent discussion, and that's why everything is transparent on NOVA. I can see you can see everything else in all the consortia, all the other members. You can see all that going on. It could be activities that you want to change things up. It could be carryover, just kind of those things that I mentioned earlier. And like I said, these adjustments do not impact or change the CFAD, as the CFAD is a one-time, once-a-year process, and we've kind of gone over that several times. Also, the adjustments do not affect the prior year allocations by members. So no matter what you do during the year with allocations, it doesn't affect that prior year. So then we go to the CFAD, and we get new money or whatever, and things are getting crazy, it can always go back to that prior year percentage. So let's see. Okay, so Eileen said Tri-City shows more funds than used. They only held funds for, now we wish to show it's through. Okay, so Eileen, that would be something to talk to TAP with, and to see how to do that into NOVA. That's what I would suggest. Seems like that would require a little technical assistance from our TAP folks. Okay, and so I don't think there's any more questions. So allocation amendments continued. So if you're direct funded, though, Keep in mind, if you direct fund it, it's difficult to amend allocations when you don't have the money. So if you're direct funded, those allocation disbursements are coming in August through June during the year. So like if you go back to the timeline, the governor signs the budget in July. The state is supposed to get the money out by the end of August. And so that first installment would be for July, August, 2 months. Then you get 1 month every month after that. It goes through controllers, county office to the district. And so by the end of June, you get 12 installments or 11 installments because the first one's a 2 month installment. And so if you're moving money around and you're direct funded, that means you have to send a check. If you have a fiscal agent, it's easier to transfer those funds around because the fiscal agent is holding those funds. If you're direct funded, you'll have to cut a check and send that to that member that you're doing an allocation amendment with. So that's just FYI. It might be easy. It might be difficult. Depends on your district and how your accounting office works. Members would have to transfer funds to other states as other members, as the state will not alter the disbursement schedule. Okay. Let's see. And then I'll turn it back to Veronica.
All right, so to complete an allocation amendment in Nova, here are the steps. So you will first get back to your allocation page. So your consortia page. So as I stated before, once you're in Nova, you will go to Programs, CAEP, Consortia, and Members, and then you will scroll down on your consortium details page to the allocation section, which is here. For the program year that you are wishing to make an allocation amendment for, you will select Start Amendment. So for here, we're going to use the 2018-19 allocation year as for the year we would like to start our amendment for. So once I select Start Amendment, this yellow warning will appear, and it reads, to amend your allocations for year 2018-19, you will need to follow the workflow steps, and once submitted, the changes will need to be approved by the member representatives. So just as the CFAD process, or similar to the CFAD process, the same steps entail. So you will select Continue here. And once you select Continue, you'll be taken to this section, which is the workflow section of the allocation amendment process. The first one is just to verify your agencies and certifiers. So again, you have an opportunity to make any adjustments to your agencies and or your certifiers via the mechanisms I had spoke about before. Here you really want to focus on your member allocation, so whatever changes it is that you are looking to make. So your current allocations are listed first. So in the beginning, Allen Hancock received a little over or close to 700,000, and Lompoc received close to $1,942,000. We want to take some of the monies away from Lompoc, so we want to adjust or remove $175,000 and $125 from their current allocation. So we'll put in what the new allocation or the proposed allocation is, and the system will make the adjustment for you. So once we entered in $767,528, we know that there's a difference of $175,125. That's the adjustment that we are making. You can see here, these two numbers were the same, so the total allocated to members and the total CAEP funds were the same. The remaining was zero. However, now the total allocated to members is $175,000 less, but the total CAEP funds remains the same. Total remaining is $175,125. That's the adjustment that you just made. So now that you're taking it from Lompoc, you want to give it to Allen Hancock. So you will increase Allen Hancock's proposed allocation to include the $175,125. Once you add that to this number, the total remaining will be zero. So you have completed the allocation process. However, you are not done. Next, you will select the Next button once you have verified all of your proposed allocations, and this bottom number is zero. You will select Next, and then you're going to go to the approval page, which unfortunately we do not have screenshots. However, It's similar to the approval process for the CFAD, so each of your members will now have to approve these proposed allocation changes. They can either approve or reject. Same process. Once they approve, everyone approves, then the consortium in its entirety is approved, and then the system will automatically adjust the allocations for each of the members that you have made changes to. However, if a member rejects, then you have to go through the same process, and you have to make at least one change to the proposed allocation in order to submit for reapproval. But at the end of the day, all member agencies have to improve in order for the system to make the proposed allocation changes. If the consortium does not approve, then you're still going to, the original allocations will still be there, but in parentheses, you'll have the negative $175,125. Again, we don't have screenshots for that. However, if there are any questions regarding the allocation amendment, definitely feel free to contact TAP, and either myself or another member of the team will be able to walk you through that process. So that's all that I have. Are there any additional questions before we close out? I'm not, okay, I see one from Dana. We have to reschedule our meeting for a few weeks later this month so I can fill in the CFAD, and it will remain in draft form until we meet. Then I can submit, right? Yeah, so if it will stay in draft form until all of the members of your consortium. So you can press submit, but it will stay in draft form until all of the members of your consortium approves. So if you all are voting at your next meeting, but you've already made all of the adjustments after the meeting and the vote has taken place, then they will go in and approve, and then the consortium will be certified as a whole. Okay, I'm not seeing any additional questions. Neil, would you like to say anything before we close out? Neil, I see your microphone moving, but I think you may be on mute.
Oh, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. So I was just saying that by accident, some of the members could go in and certify, and if that last member does certify before your meeting, it could be submitted. So you just have to be careful.
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah. No, I think that's it. I mean, we have 3 more minutes. If any, I don't see, let's see, but they won't be until it has been submitted, correct? Okay. Yeah, so don't submit it if you don't want crazy members certifying in the middle of the night and circumventing the public meeting process. Okay, any other questions? We're at time. Veronica, do you have any updates or from TAP as far as upcoming events or anything like that?
Yes. But first, if there are any additional questions, as Neil has stated before, any technical issues related to NOVA, definitely feel free to reach out to TAP, and either one of us will assist you or we'll work with the system developers, product ops to fix whatever issues may be going on. So how you can do that is by simply submitting a support request on the California Adult Education website, or you can email us tap@aabg.org, or you can even give us a phone call, but we are available to assist you. And then in addition, we do have upcoming webinars and in-person trainings. We have Jay's last iteration of the CAEP Data Dive. That's part 3. That will take place on Monday afternoon at 12 o'clock p.m. He's also putting together some in-person trainings that are along the lines of the Data Dive. However, you will be hands-on in a computer lab working through those data issues and running those data reports in different interfaces. Him and I will be working on Monday to finalize that schedule, and we will open registration. There is one already scheduled for Sacramento on June 19th, so if you're in the area and you would like to join us here at the Sacramento County Office of Education in our computer lab, the registration is open. And as Neil stated, there will be a Census 2020 webinar that will be coming up in May, and then we also have some institutes that we're running. So please be sure to check out our events section on the CAEP website under administrators and events, or you can go to events on the main page. And Holly has graciously posted the URLs for the registration, so definitely feel free to register for any of our upcoming events. All right, Neil.
Thank you, Veronica. And I just want to add, so since Nicole left, Veronica, Holly, and Liberty have had to fill in for TAP technical assistance, and I think they're doing a great job. And I really appreciate all their help and guidance on using Nova. I appreciate Veronica doing the webinar with me today. So I look forward to more successful Nova adventures and not being so difficult as we get through the CFAD process. And feel free to contact TAP if you have any questions. And thank you once again.
All right, thank you, Neil. I have just posted the URL of where the webinar recording as well as the PowerPoint will be uploaded later on this afternoon. So again, if you had to leave for any reason, or you want to go back and review or pass this information on to another colleague, you're definitely welcome to by clicking on this URL. So I'm going to close the webinar at this time, and when I do, please be sure to fill out the evaluation and let Neil and I know let us know what you thought about today's webinar, and if there are any additional questions, technical assistance, or professional development needs that you have at this time. Thank you all very much for your time, and have a great weekend.